Hello, welcome to another 13 Seasons live stream. Today we are celebrating the increased understanding season. And I see in the comments there's already a conversation going about that, and Brendan is talking about how this is his favorite season for many reasons. And the very first time that I kind of feel a certain sentimentality about this season too. The very first time that I ever did an online event around a season to start a season, it was to start this season. And I myself have been blessed with particular gifts and talents related to this season. And so it's pretty special to me too. My family did a meditation today to start the season. We try to start each season with a family meditation. And during the meditation, I was very impressed that during this season, our family is going to grow in understanding a lot. And by the end of the season, our understanding of how the universe works will have grown substantially from where we are now. And so I'm really excited for the next 28-ish days. It's gonna be really, really, really great, really special time. I always like to start with the meditation. It just sets things right. It gets us on the right track. It helps us have the right space inside to receive things well during these celebrations. And it's more than, it's not just me talking at you guys. So if you will please join me in a meditation, a short meditation to kick it off. At the end, we'll do a longer one. Please close your eyes with me. I feel so much joy right now. Just take some breaths with me. As you breathe, be aware of each of the other people watching this live stream and everyone who will ever watch it later. And be one with everyone, all of these people. Let your ego dissipate and fade away. And let us all become one. Breathe in oneness with everyone. Breathe out ego. Breathe in the unifying power of our higher power. Breathe out the walls we put between us. Be aware of everyone watching this live stream in a circle. And there's a conduit of power, of like electricity that flows through everyone in the circle, so that ideas and powers and intelligence and light can flow freely between everyone without inhibition, without enmity. That all might be humble and teachable. This would be a good time to set an intention. If there's something specific you would like to learn during today at this time, put that intention into that circle. You might be hearing my kids. They're very loud in the back and they're laughing. Children laughing is a good thing. If you hear a child laugh, please just see it as an invitation to become more childlike and go deeper and deeper into meditation. Once you've set your intention, open your eyes. Let the meditative state merge with your conscious state. It's all one. I'm reading Brendan's comment now. I appreciate your insights, Brendan. And I'm glad your process ends in laughter. Okay. I want to bring up an analogy to start us off here today. On my phone here, I have my camera. I'm going to use this as an example. So on my camera, there's this little button on the bottom that switches from selfie mode to the other end, right? So you go from selfie mode to whatever you call the other, rear camera mode, right? There's that flip that happens. And that flip that happens from selfie mode to rear camera mode, I want to use as an analogy for what knowledge can do. When knowledge is applied virtuously with the 8 principles, they're on the 13th season site under increased understanding. When knowledge is applied virtuously and we have that kind of knowledge process that's described there, it can flip us just like a camera phone from selfish to selfless. And I don't mean the kind of selflessness where you like sacrifice yourself and you have no energy left and you like are just like, I'm giving of myself for others and I don't have anything left for me. I mean, that's not what I mean by selflessness. I mean true, humble, confident love for yourself and others. Too often we do this kind of fake selflessness. It's actually a coping mechanism where we say, I hurt so bad and I'm so wounded. And if I just serve others, I forget I'm wounded. And we think that that's like, now there is a place for forget yourself and go to work, right? You can find yourself by losing yourself. There's a place for that. But there's this distinction between that and this coping mechanism version of that. It's like a fake version of that where we know we're wounded and we feel bad about ourselves. So we try to serve people to forget we're wounded. And when we do that, we're neglecting the work that needs to be done to really care for ourselves and to love ourselves. True selflessness involves loving yourself. If you think of God as the oneness of everything, that everything is embedded inside God, then God has to love themselves to love us because we're embedded in God. Love your neighbor as yourself. If you can only love others to the degree you love yourself. So when I say selfless, I'm not talking about not taking care of yourself. What I'm talking about is letting go of ego. And ego is like this thing where you don't love yourself. And so you try to make up for that because you lack confidence in yourself. You're like, I'm scared I suck. And you're so scared that you might suck that you try to make up for that by putting yourself above others in these kind of fake ways that don't matter. And ego loves to use knowledge, okay? like ego's favorite things to do are use like appearance and money, position, and knowledge, right? Ego loves to go to those things. So ego likes to be like, I look better than you, or I'm richer than you, or I have like this more important job than you do. Or ego also likes to do, I'm a bigger victim than anyone else, right? I'm like the most I'm like the most hurt. That's how the ego does. But the other one ego likes to do is I have more knowledge, right? I'm smarter than everyone else. Look how smart I am, right? Eckhart Tolle tells a story about when he was in college and before he learned to let go of ego. And he's kind of like the guy that teaches about ego. Before he learned to let go of ego, he was in college and he said that he rode around this little scooter thing that was like barely staying together. And he would ride around and he was super poor. And he says that he doesn't feel like he's a very attractive man. And the way he talks about, he doesn't really put himself down, but he's just kind of like, yeah, I'm just not a very attractive guy. So, he didn't feel like he could rely on his looks or his money because he was a super poor college student, but he loved to study philosophy and he thought of himself as extremely smart. And so he would be like riding on his little scooter and some person, a nice car would drive by and shoot mud at him. And he'd go, covered in mud. He'd feel so angry and he'd be like, I'm so mad, but I bet I've read more books than they have. And I bet I know more philosophers than they do. And I bet I'm like way more learned than they are. And he would use that smartness as like his ego, like go-to point. And I know I've done this a lot in my life. I've definitely used, I have gifts for intelligence and learning and teaching. And I've definitely like gone to that. That's where my ego is fed off of. And so for me, and maybe for you too, it's really easy to think of knowledge as something that leads to selfishness. Knowledge is something that leads to ego, right? Oh, you know a lot. And then you're like, oh, I'm so smart. And you're in books all the time. And so you're not really being around people because your friends are the books, right? So it's easy to think of knowledge as something that disconnects us from others, but it doesn't need to be that way. The true kind of knowledge or understanding that we're talking about with this season actually connects us to people. It does not separate us from them. And so if we have that kind of knowledge, and by the way, I am looking at the comments, Brendan and Jamie are having a wonderful little exchange of ideas in the comments. So yeah, please feel free to keep commenting, and if you show any questions there, we'll stop and talk about those questions. But when it comes to knowledge can be the flip from ego to selflessness. And to make that flip, it's like turning lead to gold. Alchemists back in the day used to talk about how they had their goal was to figure out how to turn lead to gold. And they also wanted to be able to transform the matter of our body that dies to immortal matter. They were searching for the great philosopher's stone. That's Harry Potter, talks about this. The philosopher's stone, which they believe was the stone they could create, this technology they could create that could turn lead to gold and turn mortal matter to immortal matter. And so in some ways, though, knowledge can be like a philosopher's stone. And knowledge, true virtuous knowledge, turns ego and selfishness to confident selflessness. Let's talk about how that happens. So when we talk about knowledge, in the way we're talking about in 13 seasons, we got to go right to a word that Brendan's used in the comments already, which is schema. Schema. Some of you that are listening, know this already, but I want to review just a bit, and for anyone that doesn't. So schema is like everything you know and how your brain organizes it all. So schema, it's like a tapestry. That's how on the 13 season site, that's a metaphor we use. So it's like a tapestry, and you can imagine a tapestry, lots of different colors woven together, right? And the tapestry is like everything you know. And then you have different threads that are threaded through it in different colors. They're like the little pieces of what you know. And it makes like a really nice pattern. You look at it all together, but it's never done, okay? Like throughout your life, you're constantly working on a tapestry. But the thing about schema is that you don't know what it's going to look like. Like sometimes when people make tapestries, they might, they'll draw the pattern ahead of time and then start working on it. But schema isn't like that. Throughout life, you're making your schema without quite always knowing what the end goal is. And you're just like putting it together. Now you could say that the end goal is your unity, right? And that there is an end goal that exists. That's your yearnity. And if you're really spiritually in tune, you can be in tune enough with your yearnity to help your schema move towards your yearnity, towards the schema, the end schema that you yearn towards. So that in that way, there is like a pattern you're working towards, but we don't really know the details of it very much. And so throughout life, we're getting surprised by things we learn. And we're like building our tapestry, and then we're constantly taking it apart again, right? We're like, we're in tapestry again. We're like, oh, nope. I learned something new that changed my perspective. I got to take this purple out here and replace it with red, right? And we're constantly redoing this tapestry constantly throughout our lives. As we build this schema, and that's like all thread together in this web of information with different ideas. And your schema includes like everything that there is in terms of knowledge, right? Your schema includes like your book knowledge, what you know about like math or like science and stuff like that. It includes all your worldviews and philosophies and spiritual views and religious views, right? And your understanding of like how the universe works and why the universe is. It also includes like your understanding of how society's set up and your understanding of how people relate, right? So like if one person sees a cop and then feels safe and says, oh, okay, the police are here, I know that I'm safe because the police protect me. And the other person sees a cop and is like, holy crap, that cop might hurt me, right? That's a schema thing, right? Each of those people, because of the way they were raised and the experiences they've had, each of them sees a cop a different way. Someone else might just think, oh, I'm going to get a speeding ticket. And so different people based on the experiences they've had have different, you're going to see a cop and instantly have different reactions because they have different schemas, right? And so our like this kind of gut reactions we have to things are based on our schema. Our sense of cause and effect is based on our schema. Our expectations of people is based on a schema, right? So like there might be a certain person I know, and I know they're always going to be on time, and that's my schema. And they show up late one day, and I'm like, whoa, that person's late. That's weird. That's my schema is that's going to happen, right? My schema, I just expect people to act a certain way in my life, and that's my schema. So our schema has lots of different interesting things woven together. And the thing is that everyone has a different schema. In some ways, our schema are similar. In some ways, they're different. And if we're not careful and we're not humble, it's easy to just assume that whatever your schema is the truth with a capital T. But the truth of the capital T is impossible for mortal people to know. If you think you know the truth of the capital T, I invite you to become more open-minded, which is one of the principles of this season, and to open yourself up to the wonder and mystery of realizing there's a bunch of stuff you don't know. And there could be some things that you thought were like absolutely for sure true that just aren't. And always be open-minded to your schema changing. You don't want to be gullible. One of the principles of this season is to test things, to have a critical mind. So a new idea is coming away. You don't want to just be like, whoa, better put that in my schema because if someone told it to me. No, like when new ideas come, test it, right? Test those ideas. And when you test them, if you discover that they're good and they're helpful and they bear good fruit, then it's time to work them into your schema. And that can be painful because sometimes that means changing your schema in a big way. And that's hard. But it's worth doing because if it's good, it's good. Now, my schema is different than your schema, okay? And on social media, we see this all the time because social media, we're not talking face to face. And so on social media, two people with different schema get on social media together and they start talking about something and they each want to prove their schema right because when you take schema and put ego behind it, then it's like, oh, I'm right. And people like fight over their schema. And the thing is like neither people really know the truth of the capital T. They're just people with different schemas trying to figure something out. And that fighting does way more damage than anything else, right? Like that fighting like disconnects us. When we are connected, like all human beings, I really believe it's about everyone. All human beings yearn for deep connection with other humans. But yet we let our ego and our trauma lead us to think and act in ways that are constantly putting us odds with humans. We get mad at people all the time and we think we're right and we want to be right at the expense of, we want to be right so badly that we just want to like be opposed to people. And when we do that, we just disconnect ourselves from others and we like self-sabotage the thing that we feel like we want. Deep, real connection is far more valuable than being right. Deep, real connection is the biggest high, and it's a way better high than realizing you're right. And the thing is, the second you prove you're right in a situation, that satisfaction doesn't last more than a second. Think about it. The second you prove to someone that you're right and you get that itch scratch because you got to prove to someone you're right, within a few seconds, you're trying to prove something else you're right about. Because that itch of proving to someone you're right doesn't last very long at all. But deep connection with other people, that feeling, that is an exhilaration that lasts. So if we can figure out the schema thing, thank you, Brandon. Brendan says connection is true knowledge. Connection is one of the deepest connections, perhaps. Knowledge, one of the deepest connections, perhaps. Yes. So if we can look at knowledge from or understanding from the perspective of like understanding people and gaining the knowledge of how everything works, like because it's always about people, right? It's always about relationships, like anytime just learning about history. All history is learning about how a whole bunch of people got along over time. History is just looking at relationships from a really big scale over time. That's all history is. And science is looking at relationships. Fundamentally, all science is based on electrons and protons having a relationship. And then it builds out from there. English, like language arts, is about communication between people. It's relationships. Art is about communication between people and understanding people through their expression. It's about relationships. All of it is relationships. All knowledge is just every kind of knowledge you can possibly gain is understanding how certain relationships work. That's all there is. And when you can understand your schema and know yourself so well that you're like self-aware enough to know what your schema is and humble enough and open-minded enough to like know that not all of it is, that it's not done yet and you're going to change it over time. If you can get in that place and then you can understand other people's schema, or at least want to understand other people's schema and be curious about how other people's schema is different than yours and be curious about what you can learn from them and curious to know about their schema just because you want to be connected to them. If you and I can learn to do that, then we can get along with anyone from any walk of life. We can approach people not like, I wonder what I'm right about. I wonder what they're wrong about. We can approach people as, how do they see the world? I want to understand them. I want to learn from them. I just want to be connected to them and just look at it as understanding people's schema. And it's like people come together people come together just to meet once or to create a longer relationship. And whenever people touch, two schemas touch. And when those two schemas touch, the two schemas affect each other. And they move on through life with each schema changed. And that's a gift to both. So I encourage something like this. The next time you're on social media, think, how can I use my experience social media right now to connect with people? And when you read something someone posted and you notice ego start coming up, you might instantly be like, and I see you commented, Jamie, I'm going to get to that in a sec. When you see ego start coming up, you might instantly be like, what? They're wrong about that, right? And maybe they are, okay? Like, there is fundamental truth, right? Like, the sky is blue. There's fundamental truth in someone who gets hit by a car and said, I didn't get hit by a car. Well, I'm sorry, your leg's still broken. but the thing is that you might read, instead of reading something and think, oh, they're wrong and I'm right, I want to show them how they're wrong, think, I wonder why they think that way. I wonder how their schema works. And maybe seek to understand that. Which you might want to do, which you might do just by reading what they wrote and thinking about it, or you might do with a personal message, chatting publicly with them, asking them questions about why they think the way they do might work too, but it might get weird. Maybe you call them on the phone or go visit them in person after you read their post and talk to them about why they feel the way they do, just to understand them and for no other reason. And if there's value in teaching them some other way of thinking, they'll use their agency to seek that, right? Like, you can ask them why they think the way they do, seek to understand them. And if you do that, if they're teachable, they'll probably ask you why you think the way you do. And you'll have a chance to share that. And then each of you will go away with new schema. And if they don't want to ask you that, it might be they're just not teachable enough to get anything from them anyway. So it'd be a waste of your time to talk to them about it. And it's a way better use of your time just to understand them with empathy and connect. And by the way, when I say everything I say here is for me more than anyone. Like, all the things I'm saying right now are things I'm not very good at a lot of the times. So I'm teaching myself here, by the way. Jamie says, sharing knowledge in order to help someone can be successful and a beautiful thing where both sides can rejoice together. Like that. Both sides rejoice together. Love that. Sharing what we know in order to serve is so much more satisfying than sharing in order to make yourself look important. Yes. And here's a litmus test you can do to know which way you're at. Ego rejoices in feeling like it knows more. So when you're sharing something with ego, the way it feels is you're really excited to share because you're really excited that you know more. That feeling of like, they don't know this right now, but I do, gives you a thrill. And the second you're done sharing it, the thrill is actually done. But if you're sharing something to serve, you get a thrill from the fact that you just get this you get this giddiness from the fact that like they are going to be better now. You get this giddiness. You're just happy for them. And then after you share, you can just like watch them grow and keep being happy about it. So like, does the happiness expire after the moment of sharing? That's a way to measure how you're sharing, if you're sharing knowledge with ego or love. So how do we make the shift, right? Like if you notice right now, like I'm noticing, that you do an awful lot of things with ego instead of love. Like how do you make that shift of how you approach knowledge, right? And it comes from aligning your frequency with light, right? It comes from exposing yourself to lots of things that have a high frequency of light. And if you expose yourself to that a lot, you naturally just kind of adapt to it. That's one way to do this. And that can go back to knowledge and like reading and stuff like that, right? Like seek out knowledge from sources that are like high frequency, full of light kind of sources. Like sacred texts can be really good for this, Like, I'm a big fan of everything Jesus said. Like anything is Jesus's words, like seek those out and read those. I'm not as familiar with some of the sacred texts of other religious backgrounds, but the stuff I've heard shared from Buddhist texts is like really powerful. Buddha says things like, I teach suffering and the end of suffering. Let that sit with you. How does that phrase raise your frequency? I teach suffering and the end of suffering. Jesus, like phrases from Jesus, who says, love your neighbor as yourself. How does that sit with you? Love your neighbor as yourself. There's lots of other sacred texts out there. And I think there's value in all of them. like read them and let them and just kind of like sit with them. Sometimes it's good to try to get knowledge from them, like to read them with a critical mind on and try to like glean knowledge. That can be really powerful and that can really help you grow. And other times it's good to just kind of like read them and sit with them and not and like let it raise your frequency instead of trying really hard to like engage intellectually with it. If you every day I drive my son to a religious class, a spiritual class he has early in the morning. And then after I drive home, and when I drive home, I play the Eckhart Tolle podcast. I think anything that Eckhart Tolle puts out, any words from him, just like playing those or reading those and just sitting with them will change you. Like that guy has something going on that's good. And so I play Eckhart Tolle podcast while I go from, while I drop off my son. It's a 15-minute drive back to my house. And while I drive, I'm just playing the Eckhart Tolle podcast while driving through the forest. And as I do, and like that's changing me. Listening to that for 15 minutes each day is changing who I am. It's raising my frequency. Just like be with those words. There's a quote to this effect I really like. This quote's from Carol Tuttle. She's another one who has, I believe, some really, really, really good things to say and really good things to teach. I'm bringing up the quote now, so give me a sec. I wasn't planning on sharing this, so I got to bring it up real quick. But she has a quote in her book, Remembering Wholeness, that illustrates, it's another way of saying what I'm saying right now. And this quote has made such a difference for me. She says, by daily listening to or reading the truths we want to incorporate into our lives, we will receive the benefit of our lives changing spontaneously and effortlessly. It will be woven into your consciousness as thought and behavior, and you will become it. Sometimes we try so hard to use willpower and like goals to like change ourselves with like sheer force of will, but it doesn't work very well. Because when we try to use just pure willpower, I mean, willpower has a role in the process, but when willpower is like the main thing we're relying on, then our willpower, because willpower comes from like your upper brain, but your lower brain, which, by the way, whenever your upper brain or lower brain fight, your lower brain wins, in my experience. If you try to fight, the lower brain always wins, almost always. So your upper brain has your willpower, but your lower brain has like your trauma-informed impulses. So your lower brain is like, I hurt, I'm wounded, I'm suffering, but eating tons and tons of chocolate cake today makes me feel better and makes me forget that I'm wounded. So I'm going to do that. That's what your lower brain does. And your upper brain says, I will not eat chocolate cake. And it works for a while, but if all you're doing is that willpower, you're not doing any other tools, you won't win in the end. You just won't. But what this is saying is, instead of using willpower, like just relax, guys. Just relax, and just use your willpower to set a simple goal, which is that you will listen to or read every day. You will listen to or read the truths you want to embody, and just do that in like a relaxed way, and let it flow through you. You can write down, the way you want to change. If you're like, when I'm on Facebook and someone brings something I disagree with, I want to start reacting this way. Just write out in words how you want to start reacting, and like write it down. Like say, on Facebook, when people say something I disagree with, I respond by blank, 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 and write out how you respond. And then read that to yourself every single day. Just do it every day. That's all. It's that simple. Just do it. And you'll start to embody that truth. By listening to Eckhart Tolle's words every day, I'm gradually just starting to just, without trying very hard, let go of ego like he teaches and just be present more and more and more, just because I listen to his words every weekday. That's all. And And when we read sacred texts every day, it's also an application of this principle. Which is why a study of those texts will change behavior faster than a study of behavior will change behavior, because the study of behavior change behavior oftentimes is willpower based. Now, the other piece of this, though, is that lizard brain needs to process what it's gone through. As long as our schema is informed by our trauma, right? Like if you look, I don't have this graphic up ready right now, but if you go to 13senses.org and click on 13 virtues at the top, there's like a diagram that shows the 13 virtues, how they're related. And on that diagram, every virtue that's opposite from another virtue are connected in a special way. If you look on there, process emotions and increase understanding are opposite on the diagram. And that's on purpose. Because the emotions that you're carrying on, they're trapped in your body, heavily inform your schema. Remember, your schema includes your sense of cause and effect. And so if you touch something hot and you get burned, the pain that you feel is connected to is an emotion, and you go, I'm not going to touch that anymore because I don't want to get burned again, right? Similarly, if you speak up in a certain situation and someone shames you deeply, you're like, I'm not going to speak up anymore because I don't want to get shamed. That hurts too much, right? And so your sense of cause and effect is connected to your emotion. Your emotions are like the memory of the cause and effect. And your cause and effect is your schema. So in order to change your schema, you got to process your emotions. And what a lot of like a lot of therapy is a cognitive approach, is cognitive behavior therapy, is what, like most therapy, if you talk to therapists, you just say, you're a therapist. What kind of therapy do you do? Some will say they do emotional freedom technique, which is tapping. Some will say they do something like rapid eye movement therapy. And so that's a little different, but the majority, they don't know you even know to ask this, but the majority, if you ask them, will say, oh, I do cognitive behavior therapy. That's what most therapists do. It's just the oldest kind of therapy that's still practiced. And so, something that's older is more common because more people are doing it. The newer stuff is more experimental, so not as many people are doing it. But the cognitive behavior approach is awesome. What it's doing is it's engaging with your schema. So the cognitive, they'll use the word schema, people there in this approach. So what it's doing is they're asking you questions and helping you remake connections in your brain so that your sense of cause and effect is different than what it was before. But it takes a long time. And for some people, it never works because they never process the stuff in lizard brain. So the therapist might help this part of your brain to make some new connection never made before, but your lizard brain still doesn't believe it. And so it's really important to use other approaches that get straight to the lizard brain, process that, and simultaneously go through your critical brain to work on your that part, work on your schema that way, and get it both directions, right? And so this is like emotional freedom technique, which is like tapping on certain acupuncture points for the purpose of releasing certain emotions, right? That's really powerful. Or the rapid eye movement technique is where you like they have you like imagine like a traumatic event, and then while you're imagining it, you track your eye, they have you track your eyes on something. And what that does is it tricks your body into thinking you're in REM sleep. And then while you're in REM sleep, because while you're in REM sleep, your body processes emotions from your lizard brain. So by tracking those movements, it tricks your body into thinking that you're in REM sleep. And because your body thinks you're REM sleep, your body starts processing the emotions of the event that you called up. And then they'll have you, the way I've seen it done, at least the way I've practiced it, is they have you imagine the event the way it really happened while tracking the eyes. Then you imagine it if it had gone the way you wish it had gone tracking the eyes. And then that convinces your body to like put a new emotional memory in place of the old one. And then you your eyes track the finger while you think about all the blessings that have come to your life because of the bad thing that happened. And then that combination of those three things really, really is healing. Be careful with rapid eye technique. Some clinical trials have found that it can actually re-traumatize people. It can actually make the trauma worse if not done properly. So, a trained therapist who knows what they're doing, who's looked through the research well, knows how to avoid that problem. And so that's why it's good to go to someone like that for that particular technique. Or there are like books and certain guides that can teach you how to do it on yourself, like self-administer it. Just look into who wrote that book, and do your research to make sure that person's using, that person that's teaching you to do it yourself, is that you can trust them. Just look into the credentials, make sure you can trust them to teach you to do it in a way that won't re-traumatize you. So knowledge, or changing our schema, can shift us from selflessness to selfishness. Part of it's because we understand other people's schema, which is empathy, right? Understanding someone else's schema is empathy. Right? Empathy has three pieces. There's knowledge empathy, emotional empathy, and action empathy. So emotional empathy goes with processing emotions. It means that you understand someone else's feelings they're going through, or at least you get close to understanding them. Knowledge empathy is understanding someone else's worldview. That's the schema side of it, right? And then action empathy is that you actually act on your empathy in ways that are positive. Some people have really strong emotional empathy and really strong knowledge empathy, but they use it with ego and they go, I understand how you feel. I know how to hurt you more. And they actually use their empathy to hurt people. So that's where like the action empathy comes in, which is like you apply empathy to help people. But there's one more way that knowledge can change selflessness to selfishness, other way around. Actually, it could go either way, I guess. But as our schema becomes more aligned with truth, we understand that selfishness is the natural way to be. And I want to tell you about an experience I had. This was a very spiritual experience. I'm going to share this, and then we're going to do a meditation and be done. It's a really special experience I don't always share. Now I'm sharing with the internet, but I feel like it's a good thing to do. I had a period of time during COVID where I loved, so I go to church, and during COVID, I loved not going to church. I had some pretty negative experiences with people where I worship with, and worshiping at home without being around those people was really nice. And when COVID was coming to an end and it was time to go back to church, I had a serious decision to make. Did I want to go back to church or not? And I really didn't want to, because I had some really negative experiences with some people, and I just really didn't want to be worshiping with them anymore. But I didn't really want to go to a different church. That didn't really seem like I was not interested in that either. So I really just liked worshiping at home, honestly. So I had a hard choice to make. And I reached out to my higher power, and I talked to my higher power about it. And I felt as I did so that it was really important that my higher power wanted me at church with those people. And so I did. And that was a hard choice to make. I was like, really, higher power? Really? But I went. And one day I was sitting there and we were worshiping together at church, doing our worship service. And I had a sense of my higher power with me. And for me, I call my higher power Jesus. And I respect whatever you call your higher power. And sometimes I avoid saying that because some people have feelings about Jesus. Because there's plenty of people in this world who've done awful things in the name of Jesus. And it makes Jesus, and so because of that, because it creates a schema where for some people, the very name Jesus is triggering for them. And I don't want that triggering to disconnect, to cause people to run away from the good principles we have to teach in 13 seasons. But for the sake of the story, I'm going to tell you that for me, I call the higher power Jesus. And I had the sense of my high power with me, in this very personal way. It was like Jesus was just sitting next to me. And Jesus said to me, I want to show you what it's like to be me. And I said, okay. And then I was transformed. Okay. My mind was changed and I was thinking like Jesus. And I was like, and I was alive 2,000 years ago, walking around Jerusalem 2,000 years ago. That's what I experienced. And I was walking around Jerusalem 2,000 years ago, and I looked at a tree through the eyes and mind of Jesus, through his schema. And when I looked at that tree was me. Like I looked at a palm tree, and there was no difference between me and that palm tree. And I looked at one of my disciples, and there was no difference between me and that disciple. We were one and the same. And I looked at the enemies, the Pharisees who hated me, and there was no difference between me and them. I was one with all those, with a tree, with a disciple, with a Pharisee. I was one with everything. Everything on the earth I was one with. The planet itself I was one with. There wasn't like this sense of distinction between, oh, there's me and them. It was just like oneness. And then the experience ended, and Jesus said, I want you to experience this now. I want you to experience this state and mimic me. And then for some number of minutes, it felt like about 15 minutes. But time was weird, so it's hard to know how long it was. I was sitting here among these people and looking around, and I was just one with all of them. The same way that I experienced Jesus being one with that tree and that disciple and that Pharisee. I was just one with everyone in the room. And all of a sudden, the very idea of selfishness and selflessness didn't make any sense at all. Because selfishness, right, is like looking after yourself. But I was so one with everyone that if I did anything to anyone, I'd do it to me anyways. So if I like helped someone next to me, it was like, I'd just be helping me. So it just didn't really, selflessness and selfishness just became the same thing. They were reconciled as one idea. And that happened because of knowledge. I was blessed with a different kind of schema for a moment. And the experience ended after about 15-ish minutes. I think time was weird, like I said. And I was left there being like, wow, I've been so frustrated with all these people, but that seems so silly now. And I was so grateful that I chose to like re-engage with those people that I was frustrated with and be at church with them and worship with them. If I had chose to stay home and not do that, if I hadn't listened to my higher power to know what's best for me, I would have missed out on that opportunity. So that's a really special thing. And so as we gain more knowledge and our schema gets more and more aligned with truth, we'll come to realizations like the one I just shared. And love and selflessness will be the only way of life that makes any sense at all. And we'll realize that our desire to be selfish and our desire to have ego was just based on lack of understanding. We just didn't understand something well. And that is another way that knowledge is the elixir. Knowledge is the philosopher's stone that turns the lead of selfishness into the gold, the immortal gold of selflessness. Now I want to end with the meditation. I invite you to close your eyes with me and become aware of a river. You can breathe. And with each breath, let the river become more and more vivid to your meditative eye. You're breathing. Each breath makes the river more and more vivid. And this river represents everything there is to know. It's all the knowledge of the history of this planet, all the knowledge of the universe. The ocean is the oneness of all, the great higher power, the unity where we all meet. And that ocean is all knowledge that there is. And that ocean comes into earth like a river. that cuts through the land. And it nourishes things. That knowledge nourishes and brings forth life. And see the river branching off into like smaller rivers and streams. And each smaller river or stream goes to like a different civilization at a different stage of Earth's history, to different individuals. Maybe some of it goes to some of the great thinkers of history, to Socrates and Buddha, to Jesus, to Plato, to Aristotle, to Martin Luther King, to Gandhi, to many other great people you're thinking of. And all the knowledge they brought to this planet, which came from the river, which came from the ocean. You can see it branching off and knowledge going to all these different people in different part of the river, different parts of the river have different portions of the knowledge. And some of them might think they have the whole thing, but none of them have the ocean. Everything they have comes from the ocean, but none of them have the ocean. Now, because of the time period we live in a time period when all the knowledge of all the previous times, all the ways this river has forked is, like, you can see, imagine like all the different forks everywhere are then keep going, and those different forks fork back together. So those little tiny streams fork back together into bigger streams that fork back together into rivers that fork back together into one great river. And let that great river that has separated into all these different civilizations and minds and thinking come back together and flow right into you. And breathe and let all the water, all of which comes from the ocean and has gone through different thinkers in different civilizations in different time periods, let all of it come into you. And let yourself just receive all of it. Notice how open-minded you feel as you receive it. Notice how closed-mindedness keeps you from parts of it. Notice how when you have all of this, you can easily understand different people's schema, because each person's schema is a part of this water. And I invite all of us, while we're united in this meditative state, I invite each of us to set the intention to bless every other person in this meditation. And here are the words of the blessing I invite us to use. We bless each of us. You can say this in your head. We bless each of us to be able to receive all of the knowledge there is to receive in this last age of this wonderful species we call humanity on this wonderful planet Earth. We bless each of us to be open-minded to other people's schema, to have empathy, and to seek to understand and connect instead of seeking to be right. We bless each of us to be able to listen to people and learn from them with humility, and to enjoy the patience of that process. And if there's any other blessings you feel to pronounce on each of us, go ahead and sit and add those to your thoughts at this time. And set the intention now that when you open your eyes, this meditation will have permanently changed you. that whatever you receive in this meditation will stay with you and will merge with your normal level of consciousness with which you live life. Slowly open your eyes. Return to the normal everyday level of consciousness with confidence that you have experienced a change here. And that change is permanent. And you will continue to build upon it during this season of increasing understanding. This season's a special time. During this 28-day period, you can empathize, you can grow in your ability to empathize and learn in ways you've never done up to this point in your life. Because the earth is aligned with the frequency of that kind of growth. Push yourself during these 28 days with your ability to understand people. Push yourself. If there's something you thought you could never learn, maybe you picked up somewhere, there's a certain topic that you just can't learn that topic. You can't learn that skill. This is a great time to prove yourself wrong and reform your schema and learn that you can do that and stop having a schema that says you can't. If you think you can't do math, use the blessings of this season to do math and get good at it. If you want to learn quantum mechanics or science or learn a new language, do it this season. It's the time for it. I wish all the best things upon all of you. Thank you for your time with us here today. Does anyone have any questions they want to finish with? So you can add to the chat now. I'm going to wait just like 30 seconds, see if anyone adds anything, and if not, we'll end. Devin and Brendan just asked really good questions. Devin asked, how does one balance confidence without having too much ego? That is an hour-long live stream by itself, just that one question. Let me see, though, if I can give you a quick answer, and then maybe and it might be good to talk more about that a different time. For a quick answer, I would say this. Ego is not it's not, sometimes we think of it like this. We think of it like confidence and ego are on the same line. And if we have confidence and we get too much, we have ego. I invite you to see it completely different. Confidence and ego are two separate things entirely. They're not a spectrum. You can get more and more and more confidence and it's never dangerous. Even a little bit of ego is destructive. They are separate. Ego is lack of confidence. Ego is, I'm scared, I suck. And so I'm going to try to make up fake reasons why I'm awesome to try to lie to myself and feel like I matter. And I have to compare myself to others in order to believe that lie. Loving, humble confidence is, I love myself and I know I have worth no matter what. And so I don't need to be scared. I don't need to let fear that I suck move me to compare myself with others. Now, how do you make that transition? There's a lot of different ways. I highly recommend looking up Eckhart Tolle. I'll put his name in the chat because he's like the guy that teaches about ego. Look up his podcast and just listen to it. Listen to any episode of his podcast and you'll learn some things about how to do it. But one thing you can do is that whenever you notice ego, just say, oh, that's ego, and then move on. And if you do that enough, it's like AI. The way AI works is AI labels something a bunch of times and then it knows to make it. So AI is like if you show AI a whole bunch of pictures of some guy named Steve, and you come 150 pictures of Steve and say to AI, that's Steve, that's Steve, that's Steve, that's Steve 150 times, then show a different picture of Steve, AI's been trained and it will go, oh, that's Steve, because I've been trained to know Steve's face. Your brain works the same way. Your brain, in fact, the word schema was invented by a guy named Piaget, and he was a French psychologist. And the way he came up with the idea of schema was by studying computers. Computers had been invented, and he studied computers to understand the human brain. So schema actually came, the understanding of schema in the brain came from studying computers. So if you just give your brain enough inputs, if you say, oh, whenever an ego comes your way, say, that's ego, that's ego, that's ego, and just label it every time. Go, that's ego, that's not helpful. That's ego, that's not helpful. That's ego, that's not helpful. And just notice it, but don't get mad about it. Don't fight about it. Because fighting yourself doesn't help. Just notice it and just label it. If you do that for long enough, your brain, your soul will start recognizing what ego is and it's not helpful, and your brain will start producing it less. So that's one thing you can do. And there's a bunch of other things that we don't have time for right now. But that's a really good one. Another one is just process your emotions. The ego feeds on being afraid that you suck, and you're afraid you suck because of traumatic experiences that you and your ancestors had. That's why you're afraid you suck. You had experiences that made you feel worthless, and process them. And how do you process them? You emotional freedom technique. You write them down. You write an experience and burn it. You read the emotion code and do what that says. And if you want to, you can sign up for a life coaching session with me. And I am on the 13seasons.org. You can sign up there and we can do life coaching together, and I can help you. First session's free. And then every session after that, I just charge you an hour, whatever you make an hour. So I adjust it to different people. So whatever you're at in life, however much you make an hour, I'll charge you however much you make an hour. That's my new policy. So that it's fair to everyone, no matter where they're at, and everyone can afford it. So if you're unemployed right now, I'll do it for free. And I can work with you through your emotions. Brendan says, what thing do you think you will learn this season the most? And Brendan, what you said about being full of yourself is good. When I did a meditation earlier today, I did a meditation that had the same imagery that I used the meditation we did together. That imagery came to me in the earlier meditation. And the sense I got is that as I'm open-minded this season, I'm going to learn through like spiritual means. I believe that somehow I'm going to learn this season things about how the universe works and how the soul works and how healing works, like just things about the nature of how things are. I'm going to learn things about the nature of reality that I'd never considered before. And I don't know what they are because I've never considered them. So I'm really excited about it. 5 years ago, I began a spiritual journey where I began through like spiritual experiences that I'd never had. I have spiritual experiences that were deeper and more amazing than I'd ever known before. I began learning things about how everything works that resulted in everything we do in 13 seasons. I began learning those things through like my meditation in a way that blew my mind. And if I look back to where I was 5 years ago compared to where I am now with what I understand, it blows my mind that I didn't know how much I didn't know. And the sense I've gotten is that during this season, I'm going to experience some kind of upgrade where by the end of this season, I'll look back at the beginning of the season and be like, wow, I can't believe I didn't know that. But I don't know what it is yet. So I'm really excited, actually. I'm kind of giddy to find out what it is. So it's very exciting for me. And I know that those things I learn will help me help other people heal. Because that's the point of knowing these things. Learning things just to say, well, I know them. I mean, it is fun to just learn by its own self. Like learning in and of itself is a fun activity and enjoy, and that's good. Like enjoy the fun of that. But if we learn things and don't use them to make things better for ourselves and others, that's a tragedy. And that's why one of the principles of this season is to be accountable for what you learn. Be accountable for your schema. act in alliance with what you know. All right. That we just went on just a little bit longer than I planned to. I want to end. I love you all very much. I love me very much. And enjoy this season. And I wish for all of you to always enjoy your best self, one season at a time. Thank you and good night.